Okay, welcome everyone, and I'm happy to be your host today. My name is Joanna Karagiozov, and I'm a project officer at European Schoolnet. And today, together with SpicE Academy, we will discuss STEAM and inclusive education as one thing, because we believe that no discussion around STEAM should take place without keeping inclusion at its core. And as the title of this webinar suggests, today we will also explore another dimension. We will explore how STEAM, when done well, can actually help build more inclusive education system. So to do that, we have invited with us 4 European funded projects who have worked extensively at the intersection between STEAM and inclusive education and have done so from different angles and perspectives. So these projects will be sharing their visions of inclusive STEAM education, and they will explore and showcase the findings of the last years of research they have conducted and the tools they have built. We will also explore challenges and solutions to inclusive STEAM, both from the educator's perspective, but also from a more structural and policy-based perspective. Now, before we get started, a little formality. I would like to ask you to fill the signature form. You can find the QR code in the slide, and we will soon publish the link in the chat as well. And while you do so, I am excited to introduce to you the first speaker of today's session, Eddie Grandmeyer, who will introduce us to the topic of STEAM education through a welcoming address. So, Eddie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joanna. Hello, everyone. I'm Eddie Grandmeyer, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the SEER, the STEAM Education European Roadmap. I'm very happy to welcome you in this discussion around STEAM education. STEAM education, as you're about to find out, as you probably already know since you're here in this webinar, but as you're going to explore, is a door to an education that includes everyone, addresses all the needs because it speaks to the students as individual. So we're very, very excited to be a part of this event because we've had the opportunity to connect people together. We are connected to every project you will hear about and from today in one way or another. And we were very, very happy to be matchmakers for the occasion. So the STEAM Education European Roadmap, basically here, we are closing into the end of the project, and this is a project about creating a roadmap that will help all stakeholders to implement, but also create the paradigm shift necessary for STEAM education to become a reality in European classrooms. We're going to look at practice. We're going to look at policy. We have looked at the different stakeholders, how they can collaborate, what the challenges are for them to collaborate. And we will also come up with a few different tools that will be part of the roadmap, one of which is an impact assessment mechanism. So we will help assess projects and initiatives and classroom activities also. We will try to conceptualize a certification framework for STEAM competences for teachers. So this is a very exciting project that I'm happy to speak about very briefly today. If you want more information, the email of the project manager, Evita, is available there. But very quickly, to kind of give a bit of context, what we're looking at the SEER is what STEAM education is. And STEAM education, STEM education, STEAME education, STREAM education, we found so many acronyms, so many different versions of it that somehow still take us to the same place. So we've put that little spectrum together here to try and express how it's actually a continuum. So we go from the siloed approach, STEM topics, separated and never meeting, to a problem-based learning that's completely outside of subjects in the classroom with integrated teaching. Of course, in all of this, not every single approach is relevant for every student, every age, every need. But what we're trying to create with STEAM education is a more contextualized learning, a learning that connects to the world around it, and a learning of STEM or science education in some way that makes sense to the student. So we really want it, and we want the students to connect to STEM education through those different models. Now, our version for the SEER, the STEAM Education European Roadmap, you can see has brackets. This is an A for all. We try to be quite encompassing because here we try to look at STEM topics, at least 2 of them, combined with a non-STEM subject. And we try to go even beyond arts. We look at humanities, we look at creativity, but we also look at things like citizenship education, civics education, or even sports education. So we are really trying to look at as broadly as possible to try and break the barriers between the different subjects. So that's our working definition, but I'm very pleased to say that there are other working definitions, and that's why we've been very, very happy to bring RoadSTEAMer and SENSE, 2 projects we work very closely with, to this discussion today, and they'll tell you a little bit more about their vision of STEAM education, which is going to be very interesting. So I'm going to do a bit of promo for the SEER. We have a very, very cool event coming up, very exciting event, where we're going to talk about impact assessment. So we're going to present the new impact assessment mechanism, which is a tool to assess STEAM practices and STEAM projects. But we'll also look at the assessment of STEAM pedagogy in the classroom. So we're going to look at different approaches to validate the value of STEAM education for students and for education in general. We will have a very exciting keynote address from DJ EACEA to talk about the STEM education strategy, which has just been published, and of course that we're going to keep a very close eye on. So if you want to register, you can scan this QR code here. Otherwise, of course, the slides will be provided later on, or you can also find more about the SEER through Scientix. But now, just a quick introduction to our speakers today. So 2 of those projects, RoadSTEAMer and SENSE, are part with the SEER of the STEAM Atlas. The STEAM Atlas is those projects coming together to map the direction to STEAM education, but from different perspectives. We all have a different perspective on STEAM education, and it's very, very cool that today they're going to tell you about their vision and how it serves a more inclusive education. So thank you very much. That's it for the SEER today. Joanna, the floor is yours. And of course, enjoy the discussion with our speakers today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adi. Thank you. And I will stay a little bit on this slide just to also clarify how SpicE Academy fits in here, because indeed the coordinators of SpicE Academy, Achilles representing SpicE in this webinar, are also working with the SEER. So we are super excited to be able to create these connections and take stock of all the knowledge that is being accumulated through different experiences to build a truly inclusive STEAM education. So back a little bit to our agenda. What is ahead of us is, first of all, as Eddie was anticipating before, all projects will present the years of research and activities that have been conducted. So we have together with us today Achilles Cameas from SpicE Academy, Josep Perello from SENSE Project, and Sabrina Bresciani from RoadSTEAMer. I will introduce them a bit more afterwards. Now, during these presentations, we have invited the projects to share their vision of inclusive STEAM education and the tools and resources that have been created to pursue this vision. And after the introductions, the audience will have the opportunity to ask questions. Now, a little note, everyone can ask questions in the chat throughout the whole session. We will collect them and ask them during the Q&A. And afterwards, we have envisioned a panel discussion, a more open discussion discussion delving into the barriers and challenges that are currently standing to actually achieving inclusive inclusive STEM education systems. And we'll explore what are the structural changes that need to happen for the visions that the projects have presented at the beginning to actually be realized. Now, a little reminder to fill the signature form. And while you do that, I'm happy and thrilled to introduce to you our outstanding speakers. We have Professor Cameas, Professor Pereyo, and Professor Bresciani from the SpicE, SENSE, and RoadSTEAMer projects. Professor Cameas is a professor of pervasive computer systems at Hellenic Open University. He has worked extensively to European funded projects, among which SpicE, which he is representing today, and he has extensive experience also in boards on inclusive education and on bringing inclusion in higher education systems. Professor Pereyo is a full professor at the University of Barcelona and researcher at the University of Barcelona Institute of Complex Systems, and he represents today's SENSE project. And finally, Professor Bresciani is associate professor at the Design Department of Politecnico of Milano, and also founder of 3 non-profit organizations focused on inclusivity. So welcome, everyone, and I will start by giving the floor to Professor Cameas from SpicE.
Okay. Thank you, Ioanna, and European Schoolnet, all the team there for organizing this very exciting, as it seems, and I hope it's going to be a workshop. And hello to my colleagues. I hope I'll have the chance to meet you sometime face to face. And thanks to everybody who is participating, who has joined us for this workshop. Now I am going to present quickly, within 10 minutes, all the work we did during the 3 years, almost 3 years of SpicE project, which is now about to end. It ends in June. So SpicE is a Teachers Academy project, is the first and probably the only one until now that deals with inclusive STEAM education. The title means Special Education STEAM Academy. We have partners from 5 countries. European Schoolnet is one of them. Greece, Spain, Bulgaria, and Cyprus are represented with universities, schools, Ministry of Education, and so on. So it's a very interesting and versatile partnership. SpicE is a 3-year project. As I said, it ends this summer. And its objective was to strengthen the teachers' competencies in inclusive STEAM education, especially pre-service and in-service primary school teachers. So we focus on teachers. For us, our educators are the drivers of change, and we use STEAM education as the vehicle to achieve this change towards a more inclusive education in the classroom. We focus on primary education, especially students, educators of students with mild disabilities. We don't arrive in the classroom, we only arrive at the educators. These 4 categories of mild disabilities. And what we want to achieve is that these students are properly supported in order to take part in all classroom activities supported by the educators. The challenges we dealt with in this project are first, we had to identify the necessary competencies that the teachers should have so that they could apply inclusive STEAM education, then upskill the educators, help them acquire these competencies that they didn't have so that they could realize the inclusive STEAM education activities. Also create a comprehensive toolset to make it available to the educators, as we believe in support in peer learning. We have established already a community of educators that is quite broad. It has about 2,000 members, and also European Schoolnet has helped us a lot during the last year to achieve that and try to increase the impact and ensure sustainability of outcomes, as I will say a little bit further on. We started with research, and then we proceeded towards development and then piloting. These were the axes of research. We identified the teachers' knowledge and attitude towards STEAM education, towards inclusive education, and tried to mix those two, to blend those two, because inclusive STEAM education, we didn't find much in the literature when we started this project. Then we try to record the history and the present level of STEAM education in the participating countries, and what the teachers thought, what were the teachers' thoughts about their needs regarding the implementation of STEAM education and in supporting people with mild disabilities in their classroom. So this is where we started from, and this is what more or less we did in this project. So we did the studies. Let's start from the left side of this slide. We implemented the studies, we did the studies, and then we developed the STEAM educational framework that contains instructional methodologies, an outline of the body of knowledge, some indicative learning activities and OERs, and also educations for assessment and didactic methods that can be used for inclusive STEAM education. And also we developed the inclusive STEAM educators competence framework. That is the framework that supports STEAM educators, that lists the competencies of that STEAM educators should have in order to apply inclusive STEAM education, and on it the training activities are based. Then we developed, we are actually now developing some policies and good practices to share with the community. This is one of the last stages of the project. And then we focused mostly on the professional development of STEAM educators. So we designed new occupational profiles, we designed digital training content, then we designed and offered training to the educators, and we built a community of practice that is now going to become the Inclusive STEAM Alliance during the final stages of the project. Quickly, going through the main results, the Inclusive STEAM Educators Competence Framework, that is novelty and unique in its content. It approaches the educator's role from 5 perspectives: educator as an inclusive STEAM teacher, trainer and tutor, educator as an inclusive STEAM education designer and creator, educator as an inclusive STEAM education orchestrator, educator as a community member, educator as a growing inclusive STEAM professional. So you see that we also add the need for the educator to be a member of a community and the need for the educator to take care of his or her professional development. So these are the 5 perspectives. There are overall 16 competence areas, 42 competencies, and more than 200 statements describing these competencies. And based on these competencies, we designed 4 new occupational educator profiles for primary education that are necessary to realize the inclusive STEAM education classroom. We followed the ESCO let's say templates for that, and we designed and implemented a training curriculum for inclusive STEAM education with 3 stages: a massive open online course, then blended learning for a smaller community, and finally for selected educators a mobilities exchange program. The trainings are all based on the competence framework, so we trained the educators and the teachers to acquire specific competencies. There were 2 pathways, one for pre-service primary educators, one for in-service primary educators. They got badges, they got certificates. It was an official program that we ran through the university. Now, in these stages, we had, I think, quite a nice impact. About 1,500 people started the MOOC, 55% of it, 830 more or less completed it, coming from 14 countries, 92% satisfaction, they declared. Then in the blended course, we had about 110 people overall. This expressed 95% satisfaction, and in the mobilities, which are finishing now, 50 educators more or less participated by visiting 2 countries that hosted the mobilities. Then in the future, we have developed the COP, which is now going to become the Inclusive STEAM Alliance. We have We are now writing the Inclusive STEAM Education Manifesto and the policy recommendations. These last three are going to be the last outcomes of our project, together with the project final conference that will take place in Greece, 30th and 31st of May, through European Schoolnet. I'm pretty sure you'll find out more about that. This is the first page of the Inclusive STEAM Alliance. You can see that there is a lot of material there, open educational resources coming from the project, professional development resources, classroom resources, and a lot of other stuff that you can find in the Alliance. We will let you know when it's operational so that you can register. But I'm closing by proudly stating that this project has been acknowledged as an important project by the EU Commissioner, the previous EU Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Culture, Education and Youth, Ms. Iliana Ivanova, who mentioned the project in her video message about 1 year ago for the event STEM for the Future of Europe. So we're really proud of it. Thank you very much. And these are the contact points for the project, the different tools, SpicE Academy, the STEAM Alliance, the platform, the community of practice, and our social media and the website. You can find more about our project there. And of course, I guess European Schoolnet will share the presentations. Thank you very much for your attention. I am here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Achilles, for your speedy but very rich presentation. There are some questions regarding where the presentations will be available. We will publish them together with the video of today's session, and we will send you an email so that everyone can access them. Now, without further ado, before we go into, sorry, let me take control of the slide. Yes. Let me give the floor to Josep Pereiro from SENSE project. We have the chat for collecting questions, and we will address them at the end of the free presentation. So any curiosity you have for Achilles and for SpicE Academy and the other projects, please feel free to write them in the chat. Josep, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, also for the invitation for this very interesting debate and discussion. And I will just provide another perspective that we are just taking in SENSE. So SENSE is an European project, as you know, very similar to those that we are just sharing space today here. But the main idea or the main ambition is to within the context of STEAM education, just to emphasize the idea of creating praxis. And also in relation to what we are just talking here is that we are understanding social inclusion and also spatial design as cross-cutting issues of STEAM educational practices. There are other purposes for this project that if you want, we can just talk later on, but also just to mention that that the project is planned to finish by the end of August as well. Okay, so the members of the project are very diverse. Okay, so we don't have such a narrow orientation like the previous project oriented to teachers, but we are just considering STEAM education in a wide variety of contexts. So we are universities, we are also civil society organizations, we are companies inside our context. Also, some of them are based in Georgia, others in Romania, others in Barcelona, Spain, like me, others in Norway, which is a coordinator. The coordinator is based in Norway, in Bergen, and others are just, for instance, focusing on formal and others on informal education. Okay, so we are very diverse, and that was also part of the nice challenges that we were just having faced during all this time period. So just going to exactly STEAM, the first thing that we did, also being so diverse, is just to set up what we call a manifesto. Okay, so understanding that STEAM activities might be addressing some of these aspects, not to say all, maybe, in a single activity, but also in many other, in several activities, we can just may place some emphasis on particular aspects. No? For instance, sense meaning that that we emphasize senses, our senses, and just we put them in the center. Okay, we can also, of course, think about being something more active and proactive on the idea of co-production, also the discipline switch. But on, of course, as you can imagine, particularly here is especially relevant, is just to emphasize diversity and inclusiveness in all educational practices. Okay, so that's the first thing that we did. And at some point then, every partner were building their own STEAM lab, more or less framed in this very wide space, okay, and tried then to develop their own activities in STEAM. If we talk about the A, we were just mentioning before A for all, but also here we were wanting also to emphasize the A for arts. Okay, so in this way, in the following way that you can see in that table. So arts meaning that we have art and sciences, and they are two distinct disciplinary bodies of knowledge. And the challenge is how they can interact and work together in the context of sensing, in the context of space as a cross-cutting issue, and in the context of inclusion as another cross-cutting issue. Another level of interpretation of the A is also in art infusion, so meaning that how arts can, and there are several forms, can just filter inside scientific disciplines or STEM disciplines. Okay, and finally, also considering arts as a way of future making, in the sense that you're putting questions on the table, opening up new possibilities, new ways of thinking, and that's also one way of understanding as well the A in STEAM. Okay, so these are mostly speaking or in a very simple way. So these are the main approaches. So first of all, the manifesto, and second, these three levels of interpretation of the A in STEAM. So now going more precisely to social inclusion, we have a particular work package for that in our project. This is work package 6, and you can have all the information in the website. Sorry, I didn't put the website, but this is SENSE STEAM, so if you just Google it, you can easily find it. And we mostly focused on big 3 activities that I'm going to share now with you. So the first one was just a sort of a scoping report, and in the sense that how we interpreted, first of all, social inclusion, but also we made particular emphasis on gender and intersectionality. So the gender perspective also consider intersectionality, and then how we might align the particular cross-cutting issue in terms of space, but also considering very particular practices, art-infused practices, also the confluence of citizen science and art-infused practices, because we were here interpreting citizen science and the participatory approach as one key dimension in the manifesto that I was just mentioning before. And that was also a way of emphasizing the senses, no? This sensorial experience when we approach to STEAM. Okay, so that's why also we were wanting to interpret also citizen science as something very close to artistic practices. So that was our first, sorry, I'm just going back. I didn't talk much about social inclusion, but we were just also wanting to put all these dimensions on the table. So we were wanting to talk about, in terms of social inclusion, on respect, horizontality, co-ownership, equity, trust, flexibility. These were also our main keywords when we were just wanting to refer to social inclusion. So starting from there, what we just did is just to ask all partners to report their own activities within the 13 STEAM labs that they were configured in very different contexts, in very different places, and in different situations, I would even say, because from informal to formal education, in different levels, not only primary, but also secondary, also university level as well. So, and just to focus on to report several activities by just focusing on 2 important aspects. First, what we call 4 whys, meaning that to have a reflection, a deep reflection on social inclusion, on who is participating, who is involved, what is the topic focus, what is the topic, why you should emphasize social inclusion, and why you are doing this activity, and where as well. And secondly, we were just putting the emphasis also on what we call social inclusion indicators. What we mean by that is that in principle, there are several activities that emphasize social inclusion in the way that I just defined before. So how they were used in general, and I will just briefly present that very shortly, but the idea in the end is that we were wanting to reflect on the social inclusion indicators, these are strategies for fostering social inclusion, and the context in terms of the 4 whys. Okay, so based on this very general framework, we just have 116 reported activities, and we were asking also to reflect in different layers, an individual level for each participant, in a community level as a group, but also in a society level, just considering your neighborhood, your country, higher level contexts that are just beyond the group that we are working. So in terms of the whys, we were just asking to report why, who, what, and where, and also to answer or try to answer in these different layers. Okay, so and we were just using several analyses and several techniques to report and try to find out what is behind social inclusion in each of these levels. Okay, and these are more or less the results. I don't think that you can read anything honestly on those slides, but just to mention that, for instance, if we talk about why at an individual level, we might talk about social inclusion because it offers new skills, new competences, okay, and also in a personal growth. On in a higher level, we can talk about having a societal impact. So having a social inclusion activity might help to improve air quality in my neighborhood, for instance. Okay, so these kind of things are just happening here, and we have reported the keywords that are related on the different questions and on the different layers. Okay. The second level of interpretation or study that we have been considering is whether you by the activity promoter, whether they consider that inclusion was significant or not, or was the principal motive to organize the activity. Okay, so these are the general results. Okay, this does not mean that if it is not targeted, is not addressing social inclusion at all. But in some places, in some activities, the main focus was to foster inclusion. Okay, just as a principle and initial motivation for the activity. So these are just some of the results, and some of the activities that they were just most considered is co-creation and cooperation, sensorial experiences, and this is very aligned to the SENSE project, and also, for instance, to foster mutual learning and knowledge exchange. Okay, so just to mention 3 of them, but these are just numbers that are just providing some clues about which are the best strategies to foster social inclusion in a particular activity. So we took particular attention to very specific cases, and these are the 6. I'm not going to stop on in each of that, but they are very different. Okay, so CREDA is for informal education and on climate issues in Monza. And just to go to a very particular, a very different kind of context, in Georgia, there was a tech girls in Akhmeta, in a particular city, and this group were just focusing on STEAM education with different activities, but with the main ambition to respond to community needs and to foster local government collaboration. Okay, so I will just here focus on some of the results that we can also have in a much particular level. For instance, in the case of Barcelona, in which we run citizen science project on extreme heat, but in vulnerable neighborhoods. Okay, and there we were just working in summer camps, in a formal education context, or much more formal education, secondary level schools. Okay, so they were just mostly focused on those places that there is a huge risk of a school segregation and a school leave. Okay, so and this was also an analysis on the kind of activities that we were just doing there. And just to, again, emphasize that, for instance, mutual learning is fundamental. Just to put on the table the importance of the knowledge that they already have as just inhabitants of a particular neighborhood to study extreme heat, that was super important for social inclusion. And another level, we can talk about community engagement, which was also super relevant in the sense that is just the student or the young person that is just going to their own community and ask for a larger participation, or to share the results, or to really share the data that she or he has collected in groups to monitor heat in their own particular neighborhood. And this is just a very particular example. This again is just the particular example of this kind of activities in Barcelona. And as you can see real world issues, for instance, to really focus on real world issues might be super important to foster social inclusion and just the inclusion of particular groups that are at high risk of school segregation or school leave. Or other aspects are much to foster interconnectedness of topics, okay? So not to focus on a particular discipline, not to focus on a particular topic, but just to connect different knowledges and different approaches. And in a higher level, engagement might be super important as well. So that's just a summary of what I was wanting to share with you, okay? And based on the report. And the idea is that that we were just wanting to focus on social inclusion through the lenses of self-reflection exercise made by the persons that are responsible of the activities. Okay, why they are doing the activities, when and what activities are just planning, and who are participating. So these kind of questions in different societal spheres are very important. And on the other way of interpreting that in a very particular manner, which might be the 20 social inclusion indicators, meaning which are the activities that might be the best for social inclusion purposes. And the last thing that we are just working on, and it has not yet the final version of it, we have already delivered the report, is just to build a toolkit that is just wrapping up all these exercises. And when we talk about a toolkit for social inclusion, we are asking for a toolkit that is offering examples, good practices, challenges that we have already been going through during the project in the particular activities that are happening in different locations in Europe and in different contexts, but also just to guide on this reflection, which is fundamental to foster social inclusion. Okay, and during the debate, also we just finalized with this idea that is maybe social inclusion is a very important concept, but we were also emphasizing the idea of social creativity as a main driving force for fostering inclusion. Okay, so the idea of just do things together, co-create, involve and share, be diverse and inclusive, which are just aspects that are also very much linked to the manifesto that in which I was just mentioning in the first slides. So these are just more or less the reports that are already public, and when we share the slides, you will be able to access because there are all links, okay? And thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions later on. And this is my email address, but also you can just go to the website of SENSE, which is SENSE STEAM, and you just can Google, and I just can put it in the chat right now. And if you want to navigate and go further and go deeper, so you can just consult all the information there available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you very much. I see that at the second presentation, we already start seeing some common themes. So Achilles before mentioned one of the dimensions of the teacher being the teacher within the community. And here again, the community aspect starts and re-emerges, starting from the attitudes, the knowledge, and the self-reflection of the single individual is also a common aspect that you both mentioned. And I found it really interesting that real world problems is, let's say, a justification to get closer to social inclusion, because that's, let's say, at the heart of STEAM. And let me take back control. Our last presentation is from RoadSTEAMer. So I'll give the floor to Professor Sabina Bresciani.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And indeed, also in RoadSTEAMer, we have quite some similarities with the previous projects, although a slightly different focus. I am from Politecnico di Milano, one of the partners of the project. And here to represent RoadSTEAMer, which is a project also focused on STEAM, with basically the same time frame as the other projects we have just seen. However, our focus is on developing a roadmap for science education in Horizon Europe funding schemes. So not necessarily focused on teachers or students, but on fundings. Aiming to develop a plan of action to provide some guidance to EU key funding programs for research and innovation, to encourage more interest in science, technology, engineering, maths through the arts. Specifically, we focus mostly on secondary and tertiary education, which might be slightly different from some of the previous projects we have seen. And in terms of methodology, in that case, we are similar. So we mostly based our work on co-design workshops, dialogues, collaboration, co-creation, bottom-up approaches, and the open schooling approach. Similarly to the other project we started in 2022 and we will end in a few months. The project is led by the Lisbon Council, and here you see maybe some familiar logos of partners participating to this project. So to go in depth into the topic of today, what inclusion means in RoadSTEAMer, we started developing a framework with the criteria. As you can see, creativity, collaboration, disciplinary interrelationships, real-world connections, thinking, making, doing, and inclusion, personalization, empowerment, with equity as an all-encompassing principle. I guess you can see that there are a lot of similarities with the previous projects, which I think is very reassuring. No? We are all going in the same direction. So just to clarify a little bit these keywords, by inclusion, personalization, and empowerment, we mean to focus on a wider range of interests with the students' active construction of personal meaning and identity. So to build basically their self-efficacy and their confidence through the STEAM approach, and greater inclusion, specifically focusing on underrepresented groups. So of course we focus on the gender issue, but also on a lot of types of underrepresented groups, including people or students with disabilities or with difficulties in accessing education due to distance or to language or to any number of other reasons. While in terms of equity, we mean equity as an all-encompassing principle. So equity between the subjects, the disciplines, equity between the students, the learners, and the teachers, so that the teachers are not necessarily top-down, but they see themselves more as facilitators in learning. And also equity in terms of topics that are discussed in class, in particular focusing on socially equitable responses to global challenges. Also the methodology has been, I will not go through the entire methodology, but I just want to focus on or to highlight the fact that the co-design, we have run dozens and dozens of co-design sessions, some of which with, I mean, obviously with diverse stakeholders, but some of which with students with disabilities, in particular autism, given the rise of autism in in the population, in the schools, and special education teachers, and as well as, of course, the industries. So to hear a broader perspectives on how the different players interpret STEAM, STEM, and inclusion. And also different type of students, from arts to design to engineering, and they are very different. So I'm not going to read this in details, but just to say what inclusion means in RoadSTEAmer is also included in the policy recommendations that we have developed. For example, here I highlighted some keywords in two of the recommendations that we have in the policy brief, such as more comprehensive approaches to inclusion, addressing barriers faced by ethnic minorities, low-income students, students with disability, and providing access to a range of educational options. Also in relation to the digital education plan, we suggest that it should encompass a broader meaning or a broader scope of inclusion. And in the recommendation number 8, promote intersectional approaches, so similar to the previous project just presented, the focus on intersectionality, and a proposal, let's say, to overcome these issues, for example, through flexible educational approaches. So instead of the classic national curriculum, to have a wide range of curricula and ways of learning, not necessarily sitting in a classroom. So this is, again, similar to one of the projects just presented, no? The sensorial component of education, that it doesn't have to be necessarily sitting in class for learning. And in terms of tools, we have developed firstly a theoretical framework, which we have published to understand what was already known in science, the criteria, which I just presented, and also a map of STEAM practices, which you can find on our website. So thank you, Joanna, for sharing all the websites in the chat. So from the website, you can access all the deliverables and the map as well. We have also a community in which you can provide the feedback, or you or anyone can provide feedback on the recommendations that we have included in the policy briefs. As well as forthcoming. This is what I would like to present. We have a toolbox with dedicated sections, which are for educators, for policymakers, for different players, different stakeholders. And what I would like to present next is the actual roadmap, because it's a roadmap for funds. And in this case, the intended users are policymakers. So it's not, I mean, of course, it can be used by teachers, especially for providing feedback. But the intended users are the EU policy makers, for example, primarily DG RTD, DG Education, DG Connect, and DG Employment, and so on, Erasmus+. And so this is the roadmap, and I'll be glad to share the link in a minute. It's a work in progress, as you see, it's still a prototype. The project, as I said, is ending in August, so we would be more than glad to add your feedback and your input, and eventually the links to your deliverables, to your tools on this interactive roadmap. Of course, there is an associated deliverable, and we have also co-created this with several workshops, including one with the so-called sister projects, so SENSE and SEER, who might already be partially familiar with this. And so through all this research that I have presented, we have found 4 key priority areas. So strengthening the STEAM curriculum at national and EU level, enhancing teacher training and the learning environment, which includes some aspects brought up by SEER and SENSE. STEAM literate citizens aligning STEAM education and career design, which is something that maybe we have not heard in previous projects. It seems a bit unique to ours, with suggestions, for example, to have more support for students, especially students with disabilities, in career design and defining their career path. For example, through life design or through career centers. And finally, the fourth priority area is transdisciplinary, effective, inclusive STEAM education paradigms promoting equity. So this is very much the topic for today. This is an interactive graph, so you can actually click on each of the actions, which are categorized by funding instrument. And since I don't trust too much the technology and I'm not screen sharing, I just have a screen here, but then you can navigate it yourself. So, for example, here we are linking indeed the project SpicE in this action, which is called effectiveness of STEAM and transdisciplinary learning paradigms to support learning preferences and needs of diverse learners. So each of the actions, if you click, is structured into a brief description, some examples with interactive links, potential funding instruments, the alignment with the STEM education strategic plan, because some actions are in support and some are expanding, so they are different. As you see, there are some areas with written coming soon because it's a prototype and we are still working on it, so it's not complete. And if you have any feedback, we will be more than glad to add any other links and information. Another action specific on inclusivity is an economic case for inclusive STEAM education. And we felt this was very important because it seems that to convince policymakers, we need to also show that there is an economic case in having inclusive education, and in this context, inclusive STEAM education, or how the arts and the integration of the disciplines can be particularly useful for having a more inclusive education. And here we have many examples from Europe and from abroad. For example, companies, especially from abroad, that have specific programs for inclusivity. And hiring, for example, autism, specific to autism or ADHD or different kind of abilities and neurodivergence, as well as schools or programs that don't label students as having disabilities, but as twice exceptional. And this is also in Europe, primarily outside of Europe. And finally, I mean, we have many actions. I'm just selecting a few because my time is over. Investigating the efficacy of policies to increase hybrid and blended learning. This is something we have heard from the students, especially students with autism, that they prefer not to stay in class because for them it's too much, but they still like to go into class. So to find the balance between how many days or how many hours to have blended education. And this is a whole new sector. Oh, thank you for sharing. That could be further enhanced with artificial intelligence to support learners that because of disability, neurodivergence, physical disability, or socioeconomic status or distance from the school or the university might prefer or be able to attend a STEAM or STEM course only if it's provided in a hybrid or blended way. And then classic mentorship and scholarship for underrepresented groups. So here, I guess nobody's surprised, but we do have some examples as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you very much. And I see that one of our attendees shared the link to the roadmap, so everyone else can explore this first version, let's say. Okay, so we have a bit of time for questions. There is one in the chat. Someone Sorry, give me a second. Okay, someone asks whether there are any programs, projects, or opportunities to obtain funding to create STEAM laboratories in primary schools. I would add to funding also resources or any kind of support for STEAM laboratories. I would ask our speakers maybe what could your project do to support the creation of a STEAM laboratory in primary schools?
I don't know others, but in our case, in SENSE, we have some activities that we're performing in primary schools, and now we are just getting ready the final version of the website that will include all the activities that I was mentioning. Okay? And also the toolkit, as you can imagine, but in relation to primary schools, there were some interesting activities very much related to nature, to sensorial experience, and they will be just published very soon. Okay, so we are going to have a first version of the website in 1 month or a couple of months.
Thank you, Joseph.
May I maybe give an idea? So in RoadSTEAMer, we have had several workshops with the industries as well. So one of the idea was that, well, we are focused on secondary and tertiary, so I'm not sure about the primary, but it could be applied too. As company-sponsored labs, so to look into the local community of companies and industries that on one side they have the interest to stimulate students' future careers in STEM because they have difficulties in finding employees anyway. So it could be a way, but it's at least the companies we have interviewed seem very open to this kind of sponsorship. Just there are maybe some legal constraints.
Thank you, Sabrina. I hope that answers the question. Yes, Achilles?
In SpicE, what we offer is the Inclusive STEAM Alliance with a lot of training content that can be used to help educators develop their primary education, educators develop their competencies, and of course a group of peers that may assist them in dealing with any issue that may arise.
Thank you. I will take the opportunity to copy here the STEAM Alliance link, especially to the educational resources you mentioned, since they are up and running. Okay, so I will share again the presentation because now I have a couple of questions to our audience, and I'd like to ask it through some polls. So before Joseph did an exercise about why and what within the laboratories, and without knowing, we were doing a little bit the same. For sure, in a way less structured way, but we would like to ask to our audience in a word or two, what is inclusive STEAM for you? What does it mean, or why are you interested in inclusive STEAM? I hope you can see the poll, and it should be up. If you cannot see it, it might be also in the chat. We have a great and inclusive STEAM is justice, its community, as it has been mentioned by all projects, creativity, equity, again another term that has emerged quite often. Community seems to be supported by many, but also respect, strategy. That's an interesting perspective. So it cannot happen, let's say, without a structured approach. It's addressing the needs of students and taking action. So with community being at the center. And it's also creating purposeful learning for all, I see in the chat. Interdisciplinarity. So many of these terms, they connect quite well with the presentations we've just seen. And they connect also to STEAM, because STEAM is about addressing the needs of all students by creating, by allowing them to create the connections across subjects for the solution of real-world problems. It is about connecting with the community, and in the end, achieving equity and justice for all. Now, a second question is, we shared the good of inclusive STEAM education. Now, what are the barriers, the challenges to implementing inclusive STEAM education? And here we have, on purpose, we are forcing you to only choose one, because we want you to focus on the biggest barrier that you have encountered or that you believe is stopping inclusive education from truly being inclusive. Okay, among the barriers that are listed, we have the majority of people pointed towards curriculum rigidity, preventing interdisciplinary teaching. At PAR, we also have lack of training in inclusive STEAM education. So this is for you, Achilles, one of the barriers SpicE definitely identified and tried to address. Lack of inclusive materials is also quite widespread, difficulty collaborating with other teachers. And again, here, I'm pretty sure that if you had the opportunity to mention more than one, these numbers would be also quite high. So the winner is curriculum rigidity, being one of the biggest barriers. Now, I want to ask again, let's revert to our speakers. Based on your project's findings, what are the biggest challenges? And what do you think of, let's say, the wisdom of the group that has identified curriculum rigidity and lack of training in inclusive STEAM education? I will start with Achilles.
Well, as you said, also, Ioana, SpicE project focused on the development of competencies for the educators. So for us, this was the biggest, we identified this as the biggest barrier, as we didn't find projects or studies or papers or let's say sources that combine both inclusive education and STEAM education. We found quite a few on inclusive education. It's an older discipline, let's say, than STEAM education. We found, again, some, maybe a lot on STEM and STEAM education, but the combination was lacking. That is why we decided to focus on this aspect. And I think we developed a comprehensive framework to identify the gaps, and then we developed the content on a modular basis to deal with them. So for us, these are the biggest challenges: the lack of competencies in the combination of inclusive education and STEAM education. Then, of course, the schedule is rigid. This we know. This is a bigger problem for STEAM education than for inclusive education. I think that our experience has shown that inclusive education, as I said, is an older issue. So it has been faced in the formal systems to some extent in one or another way, and there is experience in the system to deal with it. But the rigid policy, the rigid educational policy of the ministries, I think it impacts more STEAM education.
Okay, thank you, Achilles. I will give the floor to Sabrina, since the Achilles' speech is finished with the policy level.
Yeah, well, maybe I will end up with the policies, but I start from my own experience as a lecturer. So although we might be very committed to both inclusivity and STEAM, we at the end we need to manage an entire class. We need to teach certain kind of topics. We need to have an assessment. We need to know about, well, if it's STEAM, you need to know the technical topics and the arts and how to integrate them. And then you also need to know about how to manage different types of audiences, let's say, to be inclusive. So, for example, you need to have some knowledge of autism, some knowledge of ADHD, some knowledge of depression and anxiety, which is very pervasive nowadays. What if you have students with hearing impairment or vision impairment? It's like, oh my God, I cannot make it. No, it's too much. Of course, if there are a few teachers or maybe hopefully lecturers that are committed, but it's a lot on the shoulders of the teachers. And it's often left to the willingness, let's say, of some teachers to manage all of this complexity, the topic, the assessment, the children, the needs, and even the parents sometimes, no? So if this is a huge barrier that since there is no systemic support for neither inclusion nor the STEAM approach, it's although people might be very willing, people in terms of teachers might be very willing to implement this, it's still very demanding because you also need to learn, no? And all these things and to manage. So in terms of policies, the policies would be to provide indeed a curriculum that is less rigid, but also more systemic support for teachers to learn, but also to be supported by maybe offices in the schools or in the universities that can give some advice or to offer to students also different or a range of ways of learning. Because, for example, in universities, we don't have such a strict curriculum as in the national curricula, and yet maybe there are rules relating to attendance or the assessment. No? So it would require some structural changes, and here is where the policies make some effect.
Thank you, Sabrina. Yes, so we have on the one side the need to address the needs of teachers for training and resources, but also the need to give teachers support more structurally and involving the broader community. It's Joseph, sorry, I keep butchering your name. What would you say?
Yeah, I would say that also when we talk about inclusion, maybe in relation to the previous, and just to say something different to what Sabrina was saying. So we also consider inclusion mostly focusing on emphasizing or putting more attention in particular communities that are in a most disadvantaged situation. Okay, so I mean for that, not in terms of disabilities, but in terms of socioeconomic status. Okay, so this means that also, for instance, in the cases that we can mention, for instance, is rigidity is an issue. That the rigidity of a school, of the school itself, it might mean in terms of the curriculum, but not only. Okay, so in most of these cases, the best way out or the best way to resolve that issue and to really have the students fully engaged is just to leave the classroom and go outside. Okay, so and just modify a little bit the conditions, as also it was said before, no, from RoadSTEAMer, the RoadSTEAMer project as well. No, so that's also some of the big challenges of rigidity in all senses. Okay, and I would say also the lack of the right resources also in this context, just to explain you very few cases. No, but for instance, the case of Achmeta with the girls, the idea is to create a club, okay, to work together. So this is an informal setting that it goes beyond the classroom. But also, for instance, the case in Barcelona, that in which in some of the classes during the whole semester, they were just appearing new students that they didn't know even the language. Okay, so that we were just in very, very extreme situations. So just to move or remove the classic rigidity inside class, it helped a lot just to build trust, to understand or learn about scientific terms in very different ways, and to also elevate the sensorial experiences of individuals. Okay, so because also I think that the lack of space for expressing the self, the students, is also is something important. If we talk about inclusion, sometimes how we plan classes, how we organize school, it's very often difficult. So it's very difficult to really set a different kind of scenario. Okay, and that's also why we also explore summer camps in these particularly disadvantaged or underserved or underrepresented neighborhoods. Okay, so that's also, I think that rigidity in all senses, for us, that was perhaps the biggest challenge, or at least the idea of finding spaces for more flexibility, that was a common strategy in all activities.
Thank you, Joseph. So extending the borders of the school outside of the walls, of the traditional walls, is also a challenge when you have this kind of rigidity, and it tends to leave someone behind inevitably. Now let's move towards let's say not solutions, but tools and initiatives that can help. Here I've written teachers that can help teachers to address students' learning needs, but we've seen before through your speeches that it's not just teachers, it's the community, so feel free to extend this question. And since we've already started talking about the tools that are available, how would you, let's say, recommend some teachers to get started? Like, what would be the path to start addressing students' learning needs through your project's outputs and tools? We can start the other way around, so from Joseph to Achilles.
Okay, just to say it simple and not to extend too much in the answer. For me, I think that a very important element is self-reflection. So teachers, I don't know, many other actors that are just dynamizing a particular activity within the school or outside the school, it could be, it's very important that before starting the activity, and not just doing the activity because I have to, just sit down, okay, spend some time. Why you really want to do that activity? That's something very basic, I would say, no? And what is the topic that you have selected? No, this is the one because it's already done. It's the topic that I have to deliver. Well, maybe yes or maybe not. And why doing that? And especially if you're talking in terms of leaving no one behind. No? So just to try to be as inclusive as possible in different contexts. No? So I think that for me, the most important thing is just to stop, sit down, not just go in a survival mode as a teacher, okay, and just do the activity with no reflection at all, okay, but try to reflect and maybe then redesign the activity that you have planned based on your own answers.
Thank you, Joseph. Sabrina, do you want to react to that or add?
Well, yeah, I had 3 things in mind to share, so I will start with the one that connects to that. For example, well, we are maybe most familiar with the national curriculum, but of course there are also international curriculum. For example, the International Baccalaureate has this as embedded in all the units, and there are more than 1 million students taking this curriculum. And for each unit, there is the first part is divided into 6 steps, and the first step is precisely the grounding, no? Understanding why am I doing this? Self-reflection, and what do I already know? And then there are all the learning components, and it ends always, all units, with taking actions. So maybe that's also good advice for today. Now we start from stock taking, and then we should end up with taking actions. Although this would require to change the system, the educational system, because of course countries are not so open to change the national curriculum. So if this cannot happen or not too soon, maybe we can also think of some more actionable tools such as buddy systems, which we have, for example, in many universities, with students helping or being matched, let's say, to other students, for example, from abroad or having disabilities, or maybe more focus or more making more available online learning already from secondary schools, although this has some policy and legal barriers.
Thank you, Sabrina. Achilles?
Well, as in our project, we focused on educators. I think one of the most important outcomes is the inclusive STEAM educators competence framework. If somebody studies this framework, he or she can understand what are the competencies, but also how they are described, and that's important. So the person can also try to figure out whether he or she has the competence, to what extent, and then try to improve his or her level on that competence. Then also the Inclusive STEAM Alliance, I think, is an important outcome of the project, that because it will allow the establishment of a community of inclusive STEAM educators that hopefully they will support each other during their regarding the needs of everyday practice. And if I have to say a third one, that could be the occupational profiles for STEAM educators, and for inclusive STEAM educators also, in the different roles that must be supported so that inclusive STEAM education becomes a reality in the classroom.
Thank you, Achilles. On the occupational profiles, I was wondering also at the beginning, based on your research, do they already exist, or are they something that needs to be built from scratch? And if they already exist, where are the gaps also to really creating the best conditions for inclusive STEAM to happen?
Well, we didn't find them on the ESCO taxonomy. That is why we had to create them. We were based on the education-related profiles that we found there, and we elaborated a little bit because for an inclusive STEAM classroom to be realized, it's not only the teacher, let's say the main educator, that has to be there, but we need also supportive educational personnel, and that is what we try to describe. Using the competencies from our framework to supplement the teachers' competencies that are already on the ESCO platform. And then we validated them with the community of the project, the people who took part in the MOOC of the project. This is about 1,500, let's say 1,000 people who were at any point taking the MOOC. So we have some good, let's say, idea of what they think these occupational profiles should look like.
Okay. I will move to the last question, and it is more about the structural conditions, the policy conditions that would help making inclusive STEAM sustainable in teachers' everyday practice. We've already touched upon some aspects, but if you would like to expand, this is the opportunity. And I'll start with Sabrina this time.
Yeah, I have many ideas, so I just check the time that I leave enough time for the others. No, but just beside the jokes, of course, it's the main focus of our project. So maybe what we could eventually suggest is to consider the digital action plan, maybe to have a broader definition of inclusivity, and also the STEM strategic plan, which was published only 1 month ago. Of course, it does mention inclusivity, but there could be many more opportunities and many broad for maybe more detailed also definition of inclusivity, as we have heard today. We all define it in a slightly different way, but because, you know, inclusivity is precisely inclusive of many different aspects. And so eventually it could be that if we join forces to highlight or provide suggestions to both these policy instruments, how they could be more inclusive, providing some also concrete suggestions. This could be a very actionable way for Europe, at least, to have a more inclusive strategic plans. Otherwise, from a national perspective, of course, is also to make aware the national ministries of education that to be more inclusive, this requires a more systemic change and a focus, of course, on teacher training, but also on teaching the students even how to be more inclusive.
Thank you, Sabrina. From the higher level to, let's say, to the students, everyone needs to, let's say, expand also their definition of inclusion. Joseph.
Well, I totally agree with Sabrina. It's very broad, and truly ambitious. And I can just share a very particular example here in Catalonia. So one of the efforts that we have made is been inside the context of what we call regions of knowledge, so which in a Catalan region, they have a particular policy for the regional government that has responsibility on education, but also in many other aspects. And in terms of education, they have chosen that this is super strategic field or context, but they want to take a holistic approach on that. And by that, I mean that, for instance, they want to reinforce, for instance, citizen science practices, or other kind of approaches that are much more related to social innovation or real-world problems, issues that we just mentioned somewhere here. So the idea is, again, is just to open up a little bit the context, and not focus only on education and technical aspects related to schools, but also to try to link the challenges they face with other much more broader problems and challenges that we face as a region. So that's particularly one strategy that is just starting right now, okay, and we are part of it as SENSE. And I would say that also from university, we can have a say. Okay, so also to emphasize the contact or the relationship between university, other levels of education, and also much closer contact with civil society organizations. Okay, so the idea is not to narrow down the effort in public schools and and face alone these challenges, but try to elevate these challenges on a much wider perspective that is shared in many parts of our societies. And also in this way, we would like to think that being inclusive means also be listened. Be listened so that some communities and some particular groups that are generally underrepresented or underserved have a louder voice in our societies. So that's more or less just very particular example, just to answer in very different direction than the one that was previously delivered by Sabrina.
Thank you. I see that you are all creating vertical and horizontal connections. So in the end, the inclusion has to happen on all levels and in all directions, with the help of as many perspectives as possible. So also the inclusion of perspectives to solve the broader issue. And Achilles, would you like to add?
There's not much I can add. Actually, we are now developing our policy recommendation and policy toolkit. The approach based on perspectives is the one we also have adopted in our project. Well, more or less, I could echo what has been said already, that professional development of educators should become mandatory, supported by the state, encouraged. I don't know, we need to make it happen, and that's, I think, the best way to do it. Then the programs of study must also become inclusive, accommodating, and flexible to make it the reality in the different school settings. The need to connect the different levels of education is also expressed in our case. Although we are dealing with primary education teachers, they come out of university, so we need to establish this continuum, but also go a bit further, as already has been mentioned by my colleagues, to join with the world of work, to make connections with the world of work. STEAM, inclusive STEAM careers. Let's say, then of course there is the question of infrastructure. How do we implement the different STEAM education classrooms in a way that it is inclusive, and the establishment of communities help educators to talk to each other to solve their problems, and finally the training of the context of education, that is the leaders of education, also the parents, those people who are, let's say, around the school, the actual the job of the educator, and have influence on how this job is being conducted.
Thank you very much, Achilles. You added many different other points, among which also infrastructure, which hadn't yet emerged. But we talked before of the need to expand the spaces and create more spaces for inclusive STEAM to happen. And I think that we are all converging and going back to the title of this session, STEAM, the future of inclusive education. We see that STEAM has elements that can promote inclusive education if it's done in an interdisciplinary way, if it connects to the broader community and to real world problems. Those are all things that have been quoted. But at the same time, we also still need to make STEAM more inclusive, especially when it's being dealt with at international and national levels of policy. There is a bit of time for questions. I see somebody in the chat commented that if curricula of the EU countries were more similar and flexible, STEAM application would be much easier. So there is also an issue in exchanging in these communities of practice when the national curricula are quite different. Are there any other questions from our audience? And while you think about it, I'll take the opportunity to present and go towards the conclusion of the event to present a couple of opportunities. So within Scientix and the European Schoolnet, we are currently in the making of the STEM Discovery Campaign. The STEM Discovery Campaign is an opportunity to celebrate STEM all over Europe and all over the world. And SpicE has joined the campaign this year and will award one educator who has implemented the resources of the SpicE trainings in their classrooms. So if you want to give a look at the resources, we have published a link to the Alliance, but we will also share it with the proceedings of this session. Or if you have implemented any STEM activity, this is the chance to share it with a broader community of educators and also, let's say, give inspirations, provide inspirations to others through your actions and your insights. I've left the link I will leave the link in the chat, but you can find the QR code in the slide. And the second opportunity I wanted to mention, Achilles already touched upon it, the SpicE final conference has opened its call for papers. So if you have, let's say, insights and papers in the making on this theme of inclusive STEAM education, you can find the call for paper in the slide, and I will post the links to both in the chat right away. And if there are no questions, I wanted to thank a lot our speakers for participating to today's event. I see a question, actually. Let's live with this one. I would like to understand if everyone believes that a transformation in the EU regarding interdisciplinary and inclusive education will be possible. So this is a call for hope. What do you think?
I think it will take a lot of time and a lot of effort, but I think it is possible.
Okay, down to earth. It will take lots of effort, but we are getting there.
But
Sabrina?
maybe as we have the missions, the 5 missions for they're mostly for climate issues. I mean, the mission cities, the mission adaptation, the mission cancer, soil and water. I think we should have a mission education.
Okay, a call for a mission education. Joseph?
Yeah, at least locally, I truly believe that this is possible. But the problem is just to have an overarching view on that.
Okay, a grassroots, bottom to up approach is your vision for this. And with these last suggestions and the comments, I wanted to thank you and to wish everyone a nice afternoon. Thank you for your
Joanna.
participation. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Joanna. Thank you.
Thank
Nice
you.
seeing you all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a nice afternoon.